Hello, everyone. My name is Logan Jastremski. This is my first podcast. Going to try to use this as a medium to talk to really awesome people and just learn their thoughts about life and tech and any and all betweens. Today, we have our first guest on, Michael Rihani. Michael and I are previous coworkers, and we're just going to chat a little bit about life and tech and all in between. So to kick it off, just thought we'd start off with a little bit of Michael's background. He's worked in a variety of industries. He's started his own companies. He's worked in fairly big tech companies, Apple and Tesla, and now at Tesla. So I guess maybe to kind of kick things off, we should, I guess this was a little bit too much of an intro-y, but where do we start?
So what? Let me jump in. And first of all, thanks
Yeah,
for organizing. And this will be fun. I'm excited to hang. I've never heard you say your last name. That's a super cool last
Jastremski.
name. Yeah, super cool. What ethnicity? What background is that?
So originally from Poland,
Nice.
my great grandfather came over from Poland, and my grandfather grew up in the U.S. and so he actually he started out swimming, but uh, yeah. Yeah, we
Uh,
came over from Poland.
that's cool. My last name is. A lot of people always ask me what it is as well, and I'm half Lebanese, so Rihani is a Lebanese name. And my great uncle went to New York City, and then my other great uncle went to Mexico. So I'm
Hmm.
like part of the family in the United States, and then I have like 200 cousins in Mexico, which is super cool. I've been to Cancun and the Yucatan and
Nice.
Merida and all those places, so it's fun. I love meeting folks from different backgrounds. So yeah, pleasure to be here. This will be fun.
Awesome. How did you grow up? So you went to school in West Virginia, or Virginia Tech, sorry. Did you grow up in the Virginia Tech area, or how'd you end up there?
Yeah, so I kind of lived all over the United States. So I was born in Portland, Oregon. And then I think I've lived in 7 or 8 states growing up, which is fun. And my dad, my friends always ask me like, "Oh, did your parents, were they in the military or anything?" And I always say no. My dad was a civil and structural engineering, still is, and he just kept getting better jobs, so he kept
Yeah.
moving for the better job. So yeah, I was my parents met in Oregon, and so I was born in Portland, Oregon. I've lived in like Little Rock, Arkansas during the Bill Clinton era and days, which was fun, and southern cooking and southern hospitality at its finest. I lived in North Carolina, I lived in Virginia, I lived in Maryland, I've lived in Kansas. So it's cool. I've seen a lot of America just growing up, and every 2 or 3 years, I would make new friends and see different parts of the country. But to directly answer your question, yes, I mostly grew up in the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. I lived in Gaithersburg, Maryland for about 10 years, and pretty much grew up on the East Coast and went to Virginia Tech for college.
Nice. How was moving? Was that hard on you growing up, or did you
No,
not
it's
mind it?
Yeah, I actually never really remembered the sad, oh, I'm leaving my friends. I always remembered, I have vivid memories of me moving and having so much fun with the movers, right? Like,
Yeah.
like packaging stuff and like popping bubbles and, putting things in boxes. And I was always amazed at like how these dudes would like carry the big TV or the mattress because I was like, I don't know, 8 years old or something. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a bunch of fun memories moving and hanging out with those guys. It was a lot of fun.
How was just West Virginia uh, as a whole? I've only been there driving through. I haven't spent too much time on the East Coast.
Yeah, yeah. So you keep saying West Virginia. I was in Virginia,
Sorry.
and Southwest Virginia, where Blacksburg, Virginia is, and
Uh huh.
it almost kind of feels like West Virginia. West Virginia is a different state, but Virginia Tech is very kind of rural. It's very Northern Virginia is very much like a city. It feels like Washington, D.C., but Blacksburg, Virginia, it's kind of a college town in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, right? So it was really nice having a 4 hour drive to be in both worlds and see my
Mm-hmm.
family and folks in the DC area. But yeah, I really like Virginia. Is like really down to earth people. A lot of blue collar kind of jobs in the city as well, besides the university and professors and students. So there's like a manufacturing plant that we took a tour of as part of one of my classes. So it's cool to just see like middle America and more rural America, especially kind of growing up in college and seeing that and being kind of exposed to that. So you're not just in New York City your entire life type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it for me it was interesting as well. I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana, and Indiana I would say is pretty rural, but Bloomington, just being a college town, was definitely more liberal, and there's much more culture and diversity there. And so it was interesting, kind of having the rural combined with like the college town.
For sure. I always advise people to kind of get out, right? I mean, I think there's a saying, get out of wherever their bubble is, their city.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of value in having very long term, deep roots and connections and friendships and relationships with people. But I think there's a saying that it says like, live in New York City and leave before it makes you too hard, and live in San Francisco in the Bay Area and leave before it makes you too soft, right? So,
Yeah.
it's I like that saying, and really seeing and feeling different cultures, foods, religion, politics, like all of these things, I think just make you a more well informed, rounded, and at the end of the day, caring individual, because if you don't have exposure to other people, it's hard to understand their perspective, right? And if you're only in your one swim lane, talking about swimming, or your one bubble and perspective, it's hard to really empathize and get to know people on a deeper level.
Agreed. So, kind of staying on Virginia Tech, what kind of got you? You studied business information. What got you into business, and I would say just more broadly, like what got you interested in tech?
Video games is a short answer for sure. So any parents out there listening to this, Marina, my wife, it's okay to let our son play video games. Um, yeah, for real. I mean, I remember when I was probably 10, 12, 13 years old, I would play a lot of video games with my friends after school. This was back in the Super Nintendo days, and then the N64. So I'm dating myself a little bit with some of my consoles, but it really was fun and super cool. And I remember vividly when I think it was 13 years old, I always imagined working at like PlayStation, like Sony, Nintendo, or like Nokia. Like I thought
Mm-hmm.
cell phones were cool as well, like Motorola or one of those. And I was always like, I want to be kind of an IT guy. I don't want to be a coder, but I also want to kind of be on the business side, right? Like even just like the culture of Nintendo. I subscribe to Nintendo Power, like the magazine, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just gaming culture and gaming conferences and like the business of gaming, and then the storytelling of gaming, and then the actual technical coding of it and design of it, right? So I was like, I like all of these things, and I want to work in computers, but I don't want it to be a code monkey, and I don't want it to be a business talking head. So I knew that when I was 13 years old. And fast forwarding to college, I didn't know what that really meant. And of course, every 13-year-old boy's dream is being a video game tester. So I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
they pay you to play video games and you just tell them if there's bugs? Oh my God. Like, what? I was probably 14 when I learned that. And immediately I was like, I want to be a video game tester full time. But, but yeah, when I was looking to which college to go to, I went to Virginia Tech, honestly, because of that major that they have. It's
Mm-hmm.
called Business Information Technology, BIT for short. And most other schools call it Management Information Technology or Systems, Management Information Systems, MIS. And it's such a mouthful, and it doesn't really describe it. And it's a terrible branding. All colleges should change the name of it. but basically it's the intersection of business and technology, right? So half my classes were coding and C++ and Python, and then the others were, straight up like and supply chain. I specialize in operations management, so did like computer simulations of factories and warehouses and just being efficient using technology.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, my other classes were just business, marketing, and math and all of the kind of more traditional business courses and electives. But it was really cool because at the end of the day, I formally studied things like lean manufacturing, assembly lines, Six Sigma. I think I was a certified Six Sigma belts. I forgot what it's called at some point. But really understanding the fundamentals of how technology can make business more efficient, right,
Mm-hmm.
is what I studied. So yeah, but it's funny. I didn't know all of that until I went to Virginia Tech. I just liked that it
Yeah.
had business and IT. And as a
Nice.
13-year-old kid, I wanted both of those. So I was like, I'm going to major in that.
What was your first Nintendo 64 game?
Oh my gosh, I was so good at GoldenEye. GoldenEye was my jam. I would play all my neighborhood buddies. We played 3-on-1, and I would still win.
That's funny.
It was
We
more people for me to kill. It was like unfair. Yeah.
we my father and mother allowed us to get a Nintendo 64 after we saved up some money, and we bought that a Nintendo 64, a super tiny TV, and we got Super Smash Bros. And Super Mario, and we played that nonstop.
Yeah, that Super Mario one on N64 was like, I remember being blown away by the graphics, right? The graphics were amazing on that one. It was really cool. It was like 3D Mario. It was the first time there was like a 3D version of Mario. It was always 2D back in the day. So yeah, those are the good old days.
I remember taking out the cartridges and like blowing on them because the game wouldn't work and putting it
Yeah.
back in.
It always worked somehow. I don't know if it was actual. I don't know if Nintendo's officially ever put out like an official statement that that is what fixed it, or if it was just pure luck and psychology. But either way, I'm pretty much convinced it did help.
Yeah. So at Virginia Tech, you got into, or you started doing the business uh, information and technology major, and it was kind of spurred by video games. Did you during so you also started a company at this time, and kind of researching that company a little bit, it was spurred by and correct me if this is wrong, uh, you essentially, the fraternities or frats on campus had access to old tests, and you felt like that was unfair because they had these tests and kind of an unfair advantage, and so you decided to create a startup to address that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and before we dive into that, and I can tell the fun story, I also want to clarify there was a little bit more motivation past video games. Like
Mm-hmm.
another life-changing moment, I think, that in my career and to define who I was when I was maybe call it 13, 14, 15 years old. My dad bought me a book. It was like HTML for Dummies, or one of
Mm-hmm.
those beginner books, and I read it front to back, and I made my own website, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. That you could just like make something from thin air, out of thin air. And then I was also blown away on like Netscape or whatever the browser was. You could just hit view source on any website, and you could literally just see the code that shows. It was like, I felt like it was a cheat code. It was like a video game. I was like, wait, how can I just hit view source and just see everything? This is so cool. And so I would see something cool that I liked, like a smiley face or like a animated GIF, and I would go, oh, I want that. And then I would kind of reverse engineer. And I taught a lot of my, I got the basics from that book, but most of my knowledge on programming was kind of self-taught by reverse engineering things. And one of my favorite softwares was this message forum. Once again, dating myself. There was like vBulletin and other message boards that you could download and upload to your own server. But there was this one called Icon Board. And so I created ibhackers.com. And basically all we did was, it was almost like a social network. It's kind of funny. It was just like a network where you would post hacks that you've done, right? So you download the source code of Iconboard, but if you want emojis or you want whatever, like attachments to your forum, people would just create hacks and then they'd share their hacks. It was almost like plugins, right? Before WordPress or Shopify apps existed,
Uh-huh.
right? And it was cool. I created it. And just because I thought it was cool and I was collecting these and I found a community of others and I made the website and I ended up selling it for I think $3,000 to the founder of Iconboard.
That's
And
impressive.
so I was like
That's a lot of
14
money.
years old. Yeah, it was especially talk about inflation. I don't know what it was back then, but 14 years old, $3,000 is a lot of money for an adult
Yeah.
right today, right? So
Yeah.
20 years ago or whatever that was, I was just like blown away that it was just a passion project and a thing that I thought that would help other people actually had value, right? So then it kind of,
Hmm.
I think that took it to the next level, right? Like obviously video games got me interested in technology. I thought it was super cool, the intersection of business. Then I kind of tripped into creating value with technology and, the rest is history on it. There's a bunch of other examples. And back in the day, I was mowing lawns, like, manual labor in the neighborhood. I would spend an hour, get all sweaty for $20 when I could just code up a website for 500, right? So I was just doing this trade-offs as like a 15, 16-year-old, throughout high school, building websites for people. So even before what you were talking about in college, I made my own web design company and, I found it a lot easier and smarter to make money building websites than mowing lawns. But I ended up doing both because I'm a hustler and
That's
it's going to be
awesome.
outside. But yeah, so I just want to preempt that a little bit. So what you're talking about was a startup I made in college, and I went to Virginia Tech, as you mentioned. And yeah, you're pretty much spot on, right? We My roommates were all in fraternities, and I was not. I was what they call a GDI in college, a goddamn independent. Like I don't belong to anybody. I'm not gonna pay dues just to get friends, right? So I would go to all the frat parties. I'd get invited to all of them, but I wouldn't pay the dues. So once again, true entrepreneur hustler, just schmooze my way into stuff. But yeah, I thought it was really unfair. Because these fraternities and sororities had filing cabinets of old exams. And it's
Hmm.
funny, you go to the frats and they have a gross filing cabinet with beer spilled all over it. And it's like disgusting, like in some back hallway. And then you go into the sororities and they're all beautiful, color coordinated, labeled. They have like highlights, they're pristine, right? And super organized, right? It's hilarious to see the differences. But so I'd go in to these frats and sororities as a GDI and be like, wow, this is kind of unfair that just because you pay $700 a semester to be in this fraternity or sorority that you get access to these. And since I'm not in, I can't come into the house and go to the filing cabinet. It's like, that's unfair.
Hmm.
And I mean, you mentioned, and I know you're in sports and like on the swimming team. A lot of the sports teams had these as well, right? So like the tutors for the football team, they had a
Yeah.
giant filing cabinet as well because they're
Yeah.
like, hey, you need to do good on that test, so let me help you out, right? I'm
No,
like, I'm not an athlete. I'm not in a fraternity. This is bullshit, really. I was like, this is not fair, and nobody's doing anything about it. So like once again, that was kind of the main problem I found, and so I just started very simple. I got 10, I emailed 10 of my friends. I was like, hey, can you email me an exam like that you recently had? And I'll upload it to this website. And so it started with 10 of my friends, and then 10 friends turned to 100 people, 100 people turned to 1,000, and 10, 20,000 when I was still a student. So yeah, the name of it was called Koofers.com. It's still around. We actually, got acquired and sold to another company doing a similar thing. But the naming came from it was a term at Virginia Tech. So those fraternities and sororities would store these old exams inside of coffers, which were like treasure chests, and so
uh,
you would refer to those materials as over time the C changed to a K. So you would say, hey, do you have the Math 101 Koofer, right? Because that
uh,
was whatever was stored in the coffer was called a
mhm.
Koofer. And so yeah, you just say, hey, do you have the Koofer? And
Clever name.
so yeah, we made Koofers.com, and we just put them online. And over time, we tried to develop a social studying network, right? Like a platform for all colleges, not just Virginia Tech, but all colleges, especially in North America, to upload those documents But then, yeah, we expanded to a bunch of other things. We did professor ratings, we did schedule maker, you could buy your books, we did flashcards, basically everything we didn't have as students that we wanted, we just created them.
And you guys actually got quite a bit of users. And correct me if I'm wrong again, you guys got to 1 million monthly active users and raise some capital from VCs as well.
Yeah, I forgot the exact, let's call it like 500K to a million. I forgot the exact
Mm-hmm.
number, but at least 500,000 to a million monthly active users, and we got into like an incubator similar to Y Combinator. We got into one in Washington D.C. called Launchbox Digital. It's kind of when Y Combinator was just starting. So we gave a few single digit percentage points for, small equity, small investment. And they gave us an office space in downtown DC, which was cool. But yeah, we eventually, long story short, at the end of the day, I think we raised like $5 to $6 million. We raised a seed round and a series A. And we did it for like 8 or 9 years. And what was cool was, yeah, early on and still to this day, we are, Koofers was the second largest social network on college campuses behind Facebook. Like we
That's nuts.
surpassed College Humor, we surpassed MySpace. I don't know if you remember MySpace, but we were bigger
I
at
had a
MySpace.
MySpace.
We were bigger on than MySpace on college campuses. So that was the money slide. If you're ever pitching a VC, you got to find like the hook, right? I was like, we are the second largest social network behind Facebook, and this is like 2008, and Facebook was like just blowing up, right? And so all the investors were like, "Huh, what? I'm paying attention now." And oh, you just passed MySpace? Okay, cool. We should invest, right? So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and just looking back, I'm extremely proud to say that we changed the way over 1 million college students studied, at least primarily in America.
Yeah.
The way they chose their professors, the way they studied, the way they created, the way they bought their books, chose their classes. Like it's pretty cool. I mean, obviously we didn't make the next Facebook. I'm not a bajillionaire, but I learned a lot, and it's cool. Once again, I created this, and my co-founders, obviously it wasn't just me and the rest of the company. We created something out of thin air, right? It didn't exist. We just had this idea and we just coded it up, and it became used by millions of people, which is really cool.
That is amazing. And to surpass MySpace is extremely impressive. I Yeah, that's pretty wild. How, like, throughout that scaling process, going from like the first 10 people that you emailed to 500,000 to 1 million, what was that process like?
It was a lot of just stacking good days on good days. There was no like, oh my gosh, we went from 50,000 to 500,000 overnight. It was just a
Mhm.
lot of hard work, and a lot of just compounding growth. And yeah, I mean, it was funny because our first investors were kind of like, their biggest thing they were worried about was, oh, your name is literally a term from Virginia Tech. Is this service going to work at other schools? Like, is this old exam sharing thing even a thing in Illinois or Indiana? Do
Mhm.
Berkeley students in California do it? Does University of Texas Austin, do they have this, right? Like, is this going to work? So yeah, our first goal was to prove it out at 10 college campuses outside of Virginia Tech, right? So we had more than 50% of Virginia Tech using the service. So, it was kind of product market fit to a certain extent, like, it kind of works. But so we chose 10 others, and we chose them very strategically to be very different. So we chose schools on the East Coast, we chose schools on the West Coast, we chose private schools, public schools, community colleges, commuter schools, big football schools, ACC schools. So we got a whole wide, breadth and of different schools, and we did learn a lot. It is kind of hard to a lot of the viral aspect of social networks is people living in dorms together, going to class together, eating in the same dorms, eating in the same cafeterias, going to the football games together, right? So it is a lot easier to kind of grow organically on a very high undergraduate live on campus school than it is a commuter community college, right? Because people are just more dispersed and they don't, knock into each other. And for sure, our biggest marketing growth engine was word of mouth, right? Like
Yeah.
once this thing helped you, you would just tell all your friends. You're like, oh my gosh, you're not on Koofers, you're crazy. Go to Koofers.com, right? So that was That was the biggest driver. But one other genius, maybe two other, I'd say the two proudest genius marketing and growth tactics that we had were one, during the Facebook like heydays when Farmville and all of them, were kind of quote unquote taking advantage of Facebook Connect when it first launched and gamifying it, and taking advantage of notifications in Facebook. We did a very similar thing. We would go onto college campuses. We would empower our campus reps and brand ambassadors with an iPad, and we just stand outside and go, hey, if you log into my iPad right now and invite all of your friends to koofers.com or like it, we'll give you a free t-shirt, right? And so everybody was like, yeah, of course, I'll push a button for a free shirt. And so effectively, they would kind of spam all of their friends on their college campus about Koofers. And we did the math, and we learned that for a $3 shirt, it cost us $3. So we did these in mass over time because it became such a good marketing vehicle. For a $3 shirt, we would get 6 new registered users. So we basically had a 50-cent user acquisition cost. And we had a person walking around that college campus with a billboard on their back with our Koofers t-shirt. And
that's pretty genius.
So that worked really well, and beat any ad, Google ad, Facebook ad was much more expensive. It cost $2, $5, $10, user acquisition cost versus 50 cents. So that was right through, and that did get the numbers moving. But then another, I thought, was a pretty smart marketing tactic was we had a database of all 2,000 schools in America, and we got their primary color and their secondary color, like as a hex code or hex color. And then we did an analysis of all 4,000 schools, and we found out that there's 20 color combinations that basically resemble 90+% of schools. So I think like Indiana, is that red and white?
Red,
I think?
Yeah.
Well, that's also Stanford. That's also University of Maryland. It's also like you can't. And so we basically made red and white shirts, and then we would drop those at Stanford and Indiana, and they would think it was designed for them. And we didn't need to use like the official university logo. You'd have to pay for that, right? So we made shirts that looked like they were your school colors, but there was actually 20 color combinations that made that for. And so I said 21 because Virginia Tech is very unique with maroon and orange. Nobody else has maroon and orange, so we made 21 color combinations just to make sure we had some at Virginia Tech. But it was cool that we ran the data and then married that with hyper personalization, and if you have that shirt, you're going to wear it more often, right? If you go to a football game and you need to wear your school colors, you're going to grab the Koofers shirt, especially if you're a freshman. You just moved there, you haven't bought new stuff. Well, the free Koofers shirt does it. So you would see all of our shirts at the gym, you'd see all of our shirts at the football stadiums. It was like people would text me photos all the time. It was really cool. It was on the news. People like took photos of like the local news, and people were wearing the Koofers shirt on the news. So it was pretty fun.
That's it's a impressive marketing hack to be able to get it to spread that fast and for people to rep your company. That's awesome.
The last, it's kind of funny because these are very non-online software driven. The Facebook, it did have an invite system. There was JavaScript that would like help automate and invite all of your friends. So there was an element of it. But what I liked it is this kind of online offline loop of really connecting, an online brand with the real world. Mm-hmm. Another thing that we really did is rolled up our sleeves and did guerrilla was at one point when we were trying to scale from let's say from the 1 school to the 10 schools, but growing from 10 to 100 schools, we were like, why is Florida State not doing as well as University of Maryland or something, right? And we would look at our data, we do kind of like an analysis of where the gaps are, and we'd find out it's just like there's just not enough good exams. There's not enough good content. We don't really have that many friends at Florida State, right? Or Berkeley. We don't know anybody at Berkeley, right? We're on the East Coast. We're 3,000 miles away. And so we're like, all right, let's just throw 2 of our employees or 1 of our employees and an intern in a van. Let's throw a scanner in the back of the van and put a battery pack on it. I forgot, we jerry-rigged something. And let's just have them drive from here to Florida and stop at 15 schools along the way, literally knock on the doors of fraternities and sororities, party with them, buy them a keg, whatever, right? Whatever's legal, make friends, and, just go to their filing cabinet and scan it, right? And so go, hey, Maryland or whatever school, hey, we just partied with you. Can we borrow your Koofers, your old exams? And then we'll mail them back to you in a few days, right? So they'd borrow 500 exams. They would drive to North Carolina. As they're driving to North Carolina, they're scanning it in the back of the car and uploading it back to headquarters. So it was such a crazy guerrilla marketing kind of idea at one of our board meetings, and we were like, that could actually work, and it did. It was like 2 weeks, and we like lit up. Those 10 schools are probably some of our best performing schools to date. So it also just reminds me, like, you can't always just be at your headquarters just building software and thinking they'll all come, right? Type of thing. You got to really understand the real world, or at least I had appreciation at work for us, especially since our demographics were highly concentrated college students on big, geographic footprints.
Yeah, I mean, talking with people and actually understanding the ins and outs, I think is super important. I think what's impressive is just how it's not always like a straight path, and you have to kind of figure out the path that will work, even if it's not super intuitive. So the driving physically there, creating the shirts, all the little things string together creates a big impact over time.
And my favorite part is that was like the best internship of all time. Literally, that guy, I think James, I'll send this podcast to James, and, I'll be like, he looks back, and it was literally his job to go to 13 colleges, knock on sorority houses, party with them, get their, exams in whatever way you needed to, James, whatever you need to do to convince that sorority to give us the Koofers, right? So it was fun. It was very like on brand. We were very much like for students by students. So looking back, it was kind of crazy, but it also made total sense.
So then your company got acquired. What happened during that process, and I guess afterwards?
It was a long, bumpy road. There was multiple potential acquirers, and we won't go through all the details, but we probably could have sold for a lot more with hindsight, if we went back and said yes to potential suitors earlier. It was interesting. I mean, we tried our best to make a super successful, huge social studying network for college students, but I think one thing I learned was it was always in our kind of mission statement, and this is my doing, maybe incorrectly, but I would always run around and say, what is the purpose of Koofers? The purpose of Koofers was to level the playing field and create free and equal access to study materials, right? And so we did level the playing field by putting it all on out there. But we made it free for everybody all the time, right? And maybe we took that a little too literal and too close to heart, and we tried things. We partnered with Living Social, which is like a Groupon competitor. We did deals. We got 50% off pizza, and there's other ways of making money besides just charging people for the service. At the end of the day, we never made, the company crazy profitable, right? So at the end of the day, we had to kind of sell the business. It wasn't a fire sale, right? It wasn't a total giant failure. There's a lot of value in an asset that has over 1 million monthly, active college students logging into it. So there's a lot of companies Definitely. Who valued it for that, but we weren't, printing money and laughing all the way to the bank. So with hindsight, maybe we should have focused a little bit more on monetizing. Maybe we should have tried a freemium model where, 90% of the stuff was free, but the 10% of the good stuff, or the professor ratings, or the GPA, the GPA history, maybe you had to pay for that. Mm-hmm. A lot of learnings along the way. I and my co-founders put in, personal amounts of money. We also had venture capitalists put in millions of dollars. And at the end of the day, we did not return millions or billions of dollars to our investors, right? And that's normal. 90+% of startups don't really return anything, if not much, to VCs. So it's really those one of a million kind of companies that return the whole fund. So I don't think it was a giant failure. We provided value. We did sell for an exit, but it was mostly kind of making our money back and then some. So
Nice,
it was
nice.
kind of a non-event, but it was good to find it a new home and a company with full-time employees. Obviously, as you mentioned, I have a full-time job now, right? I'm not working on it, so it's nice that it had a soft landing,
Hmm.
and it's nice that the business still runs and is still providing value to college students.
So after that, you joined another company, Tilt, and I believe you started as the head of customer happiness.
Yes, that was my job title. Yes.
What does that role entail?
Um, it was basically a glorified way of calling it the head of customer support. But I think, genuinely, I think the founders of Tilt gave it that name, right? Like it was, I'm trying to remember if it was already branded that or if I renamed it. But anyway, to the credit of the founders of Tilt and the culture that Tilt built is, when people call us or email us when they're really angry that they had a problem, we didn't want to just support them and like fix their problem. We genuinely wanted to make them happy,
Hmm.
right? Um, so yeah, it was called the customer happiness team. We were kind of in traditional businesses, the customer support team. We'd pick up the phone, we'd email, we'd respond to emails, but we definitely did go above and beyond and really try to make people happy. We learned a lot. We took a lot out of the Zappos playbook and Tony Shea and what he built there on, if you've read the book Delivering Happiness. And I've met Tony, fortunately, before his passing, and had the opportunity to, hang out with him and his lofts in Vegas, and what he built in Las Vegas was really awesome. And it's really, I think he was not a shoe company. He was like I forgot what he said, but it was basically, it was their job to deliver happiness, right? And
Hmm.
so they had things like they had no time limits on when to get off the phone with you. So they would, their support agents would just stay on the line with you for 2 hours if you wanted to talk for 2 hours, right? Versus other companies, they just hang up after 5 minutes because it's like a waste of time, quote unquote. So yeah, a big thing we took out of that Zappos playbook was making personal emotional connections. PEC is kind of what we called it. And so when people would reach out and say, "I hate you, this is broken," we'd be like, we'd fix it, and then we'd develop a personal emotional connection with that person. It'd be like, "Hey, we saw your Tilt campaign was for a bachelor party or whatever. Like, sorry, things didn't go well, you had issues," so we would mail them free shot glasses or something, right? And so out of the blue, they're like, "What, you just mail me shot glasses? This is the coolest company ever," right? So we would try to go the extra mile and really build that, and add them on LinkedIn and stay in touch and genuinely be like, "Is there anything else we could do for you? Like, sorry we got introduced in a manner where you had an issue, but like, yeah, let's hang out, come stop by our office later if you're ever in town, like whatever it may be." And people, it was very refreshing, and people really enjoyed it. And it was also cool because people would view us as the happiness team, which we were, and we kind of did like internal company happiness. So we did a lot of culture stuff. We created the Tilt culture book. It was kind of, once again, taken from Zappos, where they created an annual yearbook of sorts. And so we printed and made hardcover books, and we gave it to all the employees, right, every single year. We had pictures of our events and all the fun memories we had, and yeah, we were the ones that put balloons on your birthday, and we really thought and valued that it was our job to make everybody we engage with, happy, whether it's your employee's birthday or it's a disgruntled customer.
That's awesome. I think, I mean, putting a smile on someone's face and, I mean, saying thank you, going a little bit extra, it means a lot to people. And so I, I like that role. And I like, I mean, yeah, making people smiles important.
And the best perk of it was when I would go to conferences and my badge would say like head of happiness, and people are
Uh-huh.
like, "Can you explain what that is?" And it is fun. It's like, yeah, it's literally my job. I wake up every day with my job to make other people happy, right? And just like approaching, even though it may sound silly and it's just a title that we did and we are just glorified customer support, but I didn't wake up thinking I'm a glorified customer support agent. I woke up thinking it's my job to make people happy. And so if you come with that lens, you just do different things, right? And Yeah, it was always fun to tell people what I did.
I like that mindset. The mindset is super important. How you view the world can change a lot of your trajectory and just what path you take. So
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
awesome.
happiness at its core is very much internal and self perception, right? You could, the world could be going to hell in a handbasket, and you could still be super happy, right? If you have, it's very, very internal. Obviously, there's outside forces, but it is a lot of perception and mindset.
So on the topic of happiness, uh, in your bio, you are self-proclaimed delivering happiness. Is that kind of like going, like continuing the work that you've done at Tilt, or how do you view delivering happiness, I guess, in your day to day?
Uh, my clubhouse bio, yeah, delivering happiness. Um, um, I can go really deep and tell you the long story of why I went down a happiness path. I mean, I legitimately feel like I studied happiness informally for 4 or 5 years. I actively seeked every single book about happiness. Positive psychology is where it really led me to. I minored in psychology, so I was always fascinated by just like emotions and human behavior. Um, but yeah, I watched every documentary there is. I read every book. I tried to attend happiness related conferences, right? Like even delivering happiness. I went to some of the Zappos culture training on delivering happiness. So I was always just seeking, more and more. But I can explain if you're okay. I can explain and
Yeah,
go back
go
to
for it.
even what got me on the path, right? And then I can, end on why I think it's important to me and why I think. Um, it's an age old question of like what is life, or how do you
Yeah.
attain happiness, what's the key to happiness, like all human beings are asking this, right? So I can just give you my anecdotal kind of life story and where it got me to where I am today, which if it's interesting for others or you.
Let's hear it. I
uh,
want to know.
yeah, because I think some people come with a very positive experience, some people come from a very negative experience, they all seek it in different
Mm-hmm.
parts of their life, and they all you look to different channels. Some people look to religion, some people look to health and fitness, and they go to the gym, right? And they feel really good because they get, dopamine scientifically will make you better, right? It's a good healthy outlet. And some people go to alcohol and gambling and bad things for your health, right? So and they try to chase this happiness, or they try to climb the career ladder, right? They just do job titles. There's the keeping up with the um keeping up with what family,
Yes.
it's like Kardashians today, but
Yeah.
it's like keeping up with whoever, your neighbor who has a bigger and bigger house and a cooler nicer car than you, keeping up with the Joneses or whatever the saying is, right? So there's so many people that chase happiness through different things, right? Marriage, partner, whatever, right? And so let me just explain my path. So my path was, I kind of rewinding a little bit, when I was at Virginia Tech. Um, I I remember vividly. It was my 21st birthday. I was coming back. I went out of town. I went to Vegas, but I was coming back. I was flying back to Blacksburg and going to back to my house. And my roommate called me and he was like, "Hey man, come directly back to the house. Like don't go to class. Like I know you have class at noon or whatever. Don't go to class. There's like some stuff happening on campus. Apparently, there's like a shooting or something. So just come back home." And so I obviously did that. I came home. We were watching CNN, and it said like, two people fatally killed and injured and killed on campus. And then we were watching, and it became like 12 people, then became 20 people, and became, I think, ultimately 32 people. And so what I'm referring to is like the Virginia Tech massacre that happened, where 32 people were killed just sitting in a classroom, right? So it starts at a very negative place, and but I think a lot of people question like, what am I doing? What's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? Like, I could be sitting in a classroom and I could not be here tomorrow, right? Or 9/11, you know, the entire New York City, DC, United States, the whole world even kind of paused and self-reflected, like, what are we doing? Like, things can just be taken away from us just like that, right? So in these very kind of like dramatic turmoil times, I feel like lots of people kind of ask this question. And I tell you this kind of beginning story because one of my friends and professors and a group of students at Virginia Tech reacted to this very negative, dramatic, evil thing that happened, right? With the natural reaction I genuinely see from humans is to react with overwhelming love and support, right? So after 9/11, everybody's just like comes together. Everybody, like, racism doesn't exist anymore. Like, everybody's just in it together, and they just want to hug each other and just be thankful for life and good times and appreciate what we have and hug your mom and dad and hug your kids, right? So at Virginia Tech, there was just immense amount of outpouring of love. You could just feel it. And so some students and professors created this movement called, the students started doing random acts of kindness, right, to kind of combat the evil that just happened. So as simple as holding the door open for the person behind you, or as simple as paying for the person's coffee behind you in the Starbucks line and passing it on. And, hundreds of cars would then, pass it on. And you're like, wow, that's nice. And puts a smile on your face. And then you want to pass it on. So they did random acts of kindness. And then our psychology professor at Virginia Tech was like, hey guys, this is great. And I was not part of this, student group. I just learned about this later. They're like, hey, this is a great initiative. That's awesome. But I've been teaching behavioral human psychology for 30 years, and I know a thing or two. And for you to really make a long-standing impact, a positive impact in the world, we should not just randomly do acts of kindness. We need to actively do kindness. We need to actively care for one another, not randomly. And so using that, and it's all backed by research and science on why that is more impactful and positively reinforcing people, right? So not only just randomly doing a thing, but Logan, if you hold the door open for somebody, me, Michael, comes up to you, Logan, and goes, hey, Logan, that was really nice. Thanks for holding the door open for that woman who had a baby stroller. That was really nice of you. And I just want to let you know, right? That goes really far. and that's the pinnacle of, feeling good and getting motivation of like, oh, that's a good thing. I should do that more often, is when other people recognize it. And so when using that psychology of recognizing other people when they do an act of kindness is what sparked the creation of a nonprofit called Actively Caring for People. And that started at Virginia Tech based on all these conversations. And this green wristband I'm wearing right now is an Actively Caring for People wristband. And what it is like you wear it, and when you see somebody do an act of kindness, you go up to them, you take off the wristband, and you go, hey, I want to positively reinforce you and say thank you because you just did something kind, right? And so I just want to make sure you know that that was nice and appreciated. So I want to share this with you. And what's cool is each of these wristbands has a number on it. And so if I type in this number onto the website or the app that the nonprofit is making or has made, I'm not sure where it's at now, you would receive this, and then I could type in this number and I could log a story of like, oh, I received this, or the person who gave it to is like, oh, this person held the door open and I just wanted to let them know. And it's cool. Once again, it's kind of funny thinking through how software and the real world come together. This is very much the same, is like, so now I can type in this number into the mobile app and I can literally see kindness go viral all around the world. And I could see all the stories of whose wrist this has been on and the stories behind it. So I lived with one of the founders of this nonprofit, and he's an extremely caring and genuine human being. So I learned a lot living with him. He surrounded himself with people who really prioritize actively caring and loving for other people around him. So just when I was living in Blacksburg and meeting all these people, it was just like a fresh of breath air. It was like, it just hit me. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I feel happier. I feel so happy when I go give this to other people and they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. You just made my day. I was like, well, that's awesome. And now we're all this is all good. Like everybody's happy. This is like such a pleasant life. So it was just super eye-opening and backed by research, and there's data and reports on this. And what's cool is this organization has, you know, grown over time, and they did a lot of research on school shootings as well, right? Obviously at Virginia Tech, like how do we prevent these school shootings from happening? And without going too far into all the weeds, it's cool because they created these programs in schools, and because they found out a lot of these you know, active shooters are often unhappy and lonely people that don't have people that care for them, like is generally a trend you see. And so if we just if we actively care for one another in our own communities, that should improve that community's mental health, physical safety, all of that. And so they go into schools, they teach, create, you know, cultivating a community of compassion and actively caring for one another. And they're all researchers and PhDs, which is super cool. They go in, they measure how much kind of bullying is going on in that school, you know, and then they apply this program. And I may be butchering the stats, but just kind of follow me here, right? You know, they do before, they get the baseline, they apply their program, and then a year later they come back and they find that bullying decreases 50% just by, and they never say the word bullying in the program. They basically just say actively care, right? And compassion and spread. So they focus on the positives, and it decreases the negatives, right? So yeah, it's just watching this from afar. I'm busy building tech and working at Apple and Apple Pay and, you know, working at Tilt and, you know, these startups. And I'm living with people, and I'm seeing people that are building these things that are like literally saving lives. And I go to these high school events, and, you know, people go up and say like, hey, I was considering, you know, committing suicide, but, you know, this program and my support system around me like literally saved my life. And you're just like, holy shit, right? Like that's amazing, right? And that can be worth a lot more than, you know, 10 million Apple Pay transactions. Like I don't want to belittle Apple Pay, but you know, really helping people's lives and being positive, contributing member of other people's lives, I think was really motivating and got me wrapped around this. So there's a super long answer to what is delivering happiness in your bio all about, right? And I tell you this story because I didn't just go out and seek like, I'm not happy today, I'm going to seek happiness, right? It was a disaster. It was a massacre. It was a very terrible thing that happened, and that forced me down even questioning this, right? And it doesn't always have to be. And some people have just a great positive experience. They meet somebody, they get really intrigued by a movie or a video. So yeah, for the next like 5 years, I studied happiness, and then I found the customer happiness job. I was like, oh, that's sweet. I could do happiness as my full-time job, right? So like, if I didn't go down the happiness path, I probably would have never gotten a job at Tilt. I probably would have never met Tony Hsieh and learned about Zappos and the importance of delivering happiness in corporations. I probably wouldn't have prioritized helping other people in my own personal life or in my professional life as much as I do today, right? And so, you know, fast forwarding 7 or 8 years later, a lot of those moments have really defined who I am and my priorities in life. And that's important. And I'm not going to sacrifice it. I'm not going to work at corporations. I'm not going to work on products that don't deliver happiness. I'm not going to work on products that hurt people, right? And so I just say no. I say no to those, you know, even if they pay me 3 times more, it doesn't matter. It doesn't align with my values, right? And so yeah, my, like, you know, talking about my bio, delivering happiness, I it's the people ask me like, well, what did you learn after studying happiness for 5 or 6 years? Or, hey, Michael, what's the key to happiness? Can you just tell me? You kind of need to go down the rabbit hole yourself. It's like, if I just told you Bitcoin's a decentralized, you know, monetary innovation, you're like, great, I don't care, right? You really got to kind of experience it yourself.
Everybody has their own journey.
Yeah, so everybody has their own journey, and so I just want to share that, you know, a little bit with you on kind of delivering happiness, because I don't think there is a silver bullet. There's no like, oh, I'm just going to wake up and tomorrow I'm going to be happier and I'm going to deliver happiness. Like, you really need to be true to yourself. You need to learn what gets you going. And but when people do ask me what is the key to happiness, and I think Logan, you and I chatted about this, you know, a couple months ago, and I there's an image I saw with a quote, and I'll just read it off here really fast, because this has lasted with me, and it's also based on research. And then I'll pause on my super long-winded answer. The saying says, if you want happiness for an hour, take a nap. once again, but all of these sentences are pretty much based on research and science, right? Like you will feel better, you'll feel refreshed, you'll
Yep.
have more energy, you will feel better, and you'll be happier if you take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, go fishing. Obviously, fishing can be anything. Go for a swim because you like swimming, Logan.
Therapeutic.
Read a book. Therapeutic. It gets you in the zone. Whatever, right? And you will be happy for a day. You're like, man, I really like fishing with my dad or my brother. It was a really great day. And then tomorrow, it's kind of like resets. If you want happiness for a month, get married, right? That's why they call it the honeymoon phase. Yeah, it's like kind of 30 days, and then you start living with your spouse more, and then they leave their socks on the floor, they don't put away the dishes, and then you're like, wow, this is reality. And then it says, if you want happiness for a year, inherit a fortune. This one is also very much backed by science, and they do surveys and research on people who win the lottery. So there's a janitor or a school teacher wins the mega $1 billion lottery, right? And they get $500 million. And they're legit happier for about 1 year. They buy a Lamborghini, they buy their friend a Lamborghini, they have more friends, and then all of them ask for Lamborghinis, right? And you go on vacation, you get a cool girlfriend or whatever, right? And then you realize like, oh, I just bought a bunch of material things and I don't have any real friends because everybody's here for my money. And then you actually, after a year later, you go back and look at research and you're actually less happy than you were when you were a janitor a year ago without the $500 million, right? Which is fascinating and backed by science and research. And the last line on this quote, it says, if you want happiness for a lifetime, help someone else, right? And, I'll change that a little bit. I think it should say, if you want happiness for a lifetime, actively care for others, right? Because if you just help someone else, one time, you're not going to be good and happy for a lifetime. You really genuinely need to actively care for others. And when you actively care for others, you become happier. And science and research shows that as well. So I like just sharing those findings and learnings, because when I even look at my own self, when I'm really tired and working a lot and being short with my friends or family, I kind of realize like, one, I probably should go to the gym, right? Because that helps a lot to blow off a lot of steam and feels better. But then two is like, wow, I should just like go help people, and I should just I should be nice, and then I become way happier. So that's my answer to what is the key to happiness and why delivering happiness is in my bio. It's really positively transformed my life over the past decade. And to fully complete that story, if I never got the job at Tilt because it was a customer happiness job, I would have never met my wife, who I met at Tilt, right? So like, it's just like my life would be a totally different route if I didn't prioritize positive psychology, helping others, chasing things, and working at places that value that and empower me to make sure I'm, as part of my job, and it's part of my job as a husband and a brother and family member, I want to deliver happiness to the family. But as a part of whatever job I'm working at, I want to make sure delivering happiness is part of my job requirement.
I really appreciate all the background and the context. And I think out of sometimes some of the darkest moments in our lives, there's it can lead us on a new path, and we can learn a lot from that. And I mean, happiness is kind of like a drop in the water. You are using the wristband as an example, just saying thank you or showing appreciation for what someone has done. It can go a long way. So I find that story, as tragic as parts were, inspiring, just how it's shaped you and your journey and how it's helped you a lot.
Well, what is what's the nicest thing anybody's ever done for you? Just as an example, as a self-reflection exercise.
It's a good question.
Whether it's the nicest or most caring or loving thing, right?
There's, I think, it's hard to pinpoint a single thing. I think for me,
and sorry, don't maybe put you on the spot. I probably thought about these things for years.
It's a good question. I would say, I think I mean, I don't know if it's a single moment. What I do appreciate from my parents is just having their support. I don't think like my journey, it's definitely hasn't been a straight line to where I've gotten to today. And I've definitely taken multiple circuitous paths to how I've gotten here. And I think them allowing me to explore some of those paths and continuing to believe in me during those, even where they're not the most traditional routes, has been super impactful for myself. It helps a lot when you have encouragement from family and friends, and I think I've always just really appreciated that, and it's helped me feel more bold in taking the path less traveled.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I don't know your parents or really much about your past, but if I'm reading in between the lines, I can bet. I mean, your kind of general answer is your parents just investing in you multiple times throughout your life, right? And being there for you, investing in you, and at the end of the day, it probably sounds like multiple things, and that's kind of the definition of like actively caring. They didn't just care
Yeah.
about you when you were 7. They didn't just care one time when you were 14. And it's similar, right? In my kind of story of what got me into my career, it's, my dad giving me that book about HTML. Like, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
ask for it. I wasn't at the store. And he like literally just randomly gave it to me, right? And if he didn't randomly give it to me, I probably would have never gone down this business IT route, right? And so he just invested, and my parents, both of them, do it all the time looking back. And when I was raised, and it gave me tons of opportunities, gave me a lot of education, and it was just them actively caring for me as their son almost all the time, right? And so obviously parents, and if folks are lucky to have both their parents in their lives in a positive contributing manner, it's almost the number one thing I see all the time is like, those parents are really actively caring and loving for their children. And so, why stop just with your family when you can do that with total strangers, right? Or your colleagues, or business partners, or other companies you work with, or your customers. Like, why
Mm-hmm.
just do, I only actively care and love my son or my spouse, right? So, use that same mentality with everybody all the time. And it's hard. We all have hard days, and I'm not saying I'm this guy. I'm like a Mother Teresa every day, helping everybody, and I wear this to remind myself to be like, hey, I really should stop and pause and try to really optimize to just actively care for others. What's the thing that I can do for other people?
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. It takes it to the next level in trying to help others. And I mean, for me personally, I've really appreciated all the wisdom and guidance, and just even helping me in more difficult times. So I really appreciate that as well.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to hear, and hopefully you're not like, oh man, this Michael guy's wasting my time. He's annoying me. That's awesome to hear. But I've listen, same with you, man. Like, and no matter what experience or where we come from, I come from the school of thought that the teacher learns more from the student than the student learns from the teacher, type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just actively on a quest to learn from everybody and anybody, and I don't think anybody's smarter than me, and I don't think I'm smarter than anybody else. And there's actually I saw a quote. I think I actually just tweeted it a couple of days ago. I think here I have it on my phone. It was good advice that stuck with me on this topic, right? Let me pull it up here. Was Here we go. Smart people learn from everything and everyone. Average people from their experiences. Stupid people already have the answers, right? So, if you're the type of person running around think you know everything about everybody, like that's not the smartest person, right? So, I really appreciate people that are just here to learn from everything, everyone, and you combine that with just trying to help everything and everyone, right? And it's not just actively care for people, it's actively care for the environment, actively
Mm-hmm.
care for like where you live, actively care for yourself, right? You can't care for others unless you really actively genuinely love and care for yourself.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. So I know we've been talking for a little bit. So, and I want to talk about crypto. So I guess, so you worked at Apple and worked on Apple Pay. Is that what got you interested or into crypto or Bitcoin specifically? Or how'd you fall down that rabbit hole? Because I feel like it's not a straight line.
No, not at all. Just like my journey of happiness and studying happiness for 5 or 6 years, I think studying crypto for 5 or 6 years has been similar. And you of all people, Logan, would appreciate. My first introduction to crypto was definitely Ethereum first, right? And it was before Apple and Apple Pay. This was when I was at Tilt. So Tilt, for anybody who doesn't know what it was, they eventually sold to Airbnb. It was a startup here in San Francisco, but Tilt was a crowdfunding platform. Think of it as like Kickstarter or GoFundMe type of thing, where a bunch of people would pull their money together for a larger cause or a larger project, right? And so the Tilt name come from like once 100 people contribute, it tilts and then it's on kind of thing, right? So when I was at Tilt, so yes, I was doing like the customer happiness thing and support thing, and eventually being a product guy, they kind of pulled me back on the product, and I started working on the product team towards the end, which was a lot of fun. But working with engineering and product, and one of the guys, his name is Will. It's funny, fast forward like 7 years later, Will's a VC at a crypto fund. But so Will, the engineer, was the one who really introduced me to the concept of crypto, and specifically Ethereum, because when you think about it, we're at a crowdfunding startup, and I don't know if you remember, if you look at the archives on the Ethereum website, the first use case, it's like use cases, it says crowd sale, right? And there's like a crowd sale API on Ethereum. Because crowdfunding is hard. If you look at history, you search, Kickstarter, like controversy, basically, I'm not naming names to pick on any company, Kickstarter, GoFundMe, Tilt, they all have this problem. Is they're a centralized company, most likely in San Francisco, that would get a bunch of money from a bunch of people, and then they would decide to give the money to the creator, right? So let's
Mm.
say there's a campaign that raises $10 million, right? Well, who knows if the idea is legitimate, right? Or if it's some scam, right? There's been scams on Kickstarter, right? So you kind of want to do due diligence to, like, before you unlock the $10 million, you want to make sure they're legitimate, make sure there's a real product, make sure they're real people, right? And it's not just some viral video. So there's a gatekeeper and there's a decision, right? Let alone all the payments and legacy kind of payment providers. But and then so there's like a person in San Francisco that like pushes a button to make a decision if the funds should move or not, right? Based on whatever checks they do. And then also that person and that company is taking like 7% of that 10 million, or I'm making up a percentage, but they take a platform fee, right? And then there's the payment process, take a 3% fee for taking credit cards and all that. So like at the end of the day, you raise $10 million, but then $1 million goes to all these middlemen, right? It goes to the
Mm-hmm.
platform, and it goes to payment services, and that's a lot, right? 10%. So
That is.
the killer use case that Ethereum had on their website on the front page was called crowd sale and crowd sale API. And so yeah, we were like, hey, should we use Ethereum and like kind of disrupt ourselves and be decentralized? And we like really looked into it, and ultimately we never built anything on Ethereum at Tilt, but at the surface level, it was a new technology that was going to potentially just totally disrupt us and get rid of us as a middleman company. So yeah, I was fascinated at the concept. I was fascinated at decentralized autonomous organizations. I never contributed to the original DAO where they basically created an autonomous VC fund, which is super cool. As an entrepreneur who's pitched 100 VCs, I totally could see and appreciate a world where there's no management fees, there's no general partners making tons of money, and just like regular run-of-the-mill people could put money and invest in the next Facebook or the next Oculus or whatever. Which there's anybody who wants to look, you can Google Oculus raised millions of dollars on Kickstarter, and then they sold months later to Facebook for billions of dollars. So all the contributors on Kickstarter were like, hey, why don't I have like 0.1% of Oculus, and why am I not getting a piece of that acquisition price? Because I literally gave you $1,000 to prove that your product could be built, right? And so I was like, wow, that's cool. Like I'm literally reading the news as part of my full-time job is to build a product like that. And you're like, whoa, that could be cool. If you contribute to that Tilt and a company makes it, you could actually make money, right? So it's very powerful. And this is just the Ethereum use case on crowdfunding, and I know I give you a hard time that I think Ethereum is garbage and has no use cases, and CryptoKitties and NFTs are not my cup of tea. But I that was my introduction to it, right?
Well, I think it's interesting that you found all, or you went kind of down the rabbit hole even before you're working on Apple Pay. It was more about how to help others raise money without that large cut that's being removed. I find that pretty interesting. That was even before like just moving money.
Yeah. So, and I think it's unfortunate there is no decentralized Kickstarter, right? Like, GoFundMe, Kickstarter, I think are the two biggest ones, at least in the United States, and they do take like 3 to 10%.
Mm-hmm.
So just maximizing efficiency and having technology distribute ideally 100% of funds raised to whatever the cause is more ideal, right? So obviously it doesn't allow for companies and to employ people and be successful in that area, but still today, nothing's come from that crowd sale kind of use case, from my understanding. I'm sure ICOs were crowd sales, okay, right? So, but and disrupting the IPO model, right? And ICOs were fascinating. That was a fun little bubble for a few years. So it's all fascinating. And yeah, I mean, so this is all before I worked at Apple Pay, which Apple Pay, if you've ever used Apple Pay, is built on cryptography. It's built on private key and public keys, right? And it's more secure and private because of that, right? It's generally pseudo-anonymous, just like most of the largest cryptocurrencies are, like Bitcoin as an example. So when I was working at Apple Pay, I started taking it more serious again, because we kind of looked at it. We're like, oh yeah, whatever. We're not going to decentralize ourselves. We make our entire paycheck by being a centralized company. We raise a bunch of money from venture capitalists saying we're going to take out whatever percent fee. So yeah, this doesn't, like, it's interesting from a technologist and product and engineering perspective, but it didn't make much business sense for us to do it. And then when I worked at Apple and Apple Pay, I just started having a lot more appreciation for cryptography, secure enclaves on device, like the iPhone, securing your credit card number in your phone that nobody can hack it. So yeah, security, privacy. I learned a lot and appreciated a lot about privacy at Apple. Generally, I'm a very open and public guy. You can just Google Michael Rihani and you'll see every single thing about me is public. But I value privacy a lot more after working there. And I worked at payments and had a front row seat at seeing how many middlemen there are to make one transaction happen. You send $100, the recipient basically only gets 97 of that, right? And then the $3 is cut between like 5 to 10 companies, which is pretty ridiculous. So yeah, it was a combination of starting with Ethereum, crowdfunding at the startup, not really taking it too serious, not buying enough Ethereum and Bitcoin when it was, $10. Stupid.
We all made that mistake.
We've all been there. I have screenshots of sending $10 beers that are now $4,000 beers. That's mostly been, and I thought a lot about cryptocurrencies, and I started mostly going more in and getting more bullish and going more down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, right? As I looked at Monero, I looked at Tezos, I looked at Filecoin, a bunch. I've really looked from a technical aspect, probably the top 20, Brave and Bat Token. There's a lot of really interesting projects for sure, but I thought the most exciting from like a global massive disrupting force with the most from a product perspective, being Bitcoin being the most interesting on being better money, or gold 2.0.
Gotcha. So is it primarily like the store of value, or just being able to move money from one point to another just instantaneously around the world?
Yeah, I mean, I was the lead product manager for Apple Cash, right? So Apple Cash was the peer-to-peer tool, and it's no offense to Apple, Green Dot, their banking partner, and all of the networks and people that made that happen. It's just crazy, and that you need that many people, and that there's money divvied up. So for sure, I was mostly interested in the, you read the Bitcoin white paper, the electronic peer-to-peer cash, right? And the store of that, I've never got gold. Like, I don't understand why anybody buys gold. Gold sounds super stupid to me. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Why would I buy a gold, rock and put it in my safe or something? Like, so yeah, it definitely was not the gold narrative. It was more the I can send money to my family in Lebanon without paying Western Union 7% and waiting 7 days. I can send them money in 7 seconds for almost free, right?
Mm-hmm.
With
Yeah,
no
no,
middleman was
yeah.
the thing that really got me.
Yeah, I got into crypto in 2017. My younger brother uh, bought some Ethereum, and I was in school and I was studying computer science, and I was trying to just like do classes because those engineering classes are hard. But it kept going on throughout 2017 with the ICOs, and about the November timeframe, I think Ether was at $700, and I was like, all right, I'll go down the rabbit hole. Like, what is all this stuff? And it really is a deep rabbit hole. I mean, whether you start with Bitcoin and just trying to wrap your head around that, or if you start with Ethereum, like there's so many things that you can actually study and trying to learn it all takes forever. But it's so interesting where the tech is currently and how it's evolved from 2017 and where it's going to go.
Yeah, and I think I've been asking myself, I'm wondering why, like, what's the motivation of, when people fall down the rabbit hole of any of these cryptocurrencies, like why? I mean, part of it is like the game theory and the greed, and you just like, oh, I can, get rich off of this, right? So there's just the human factor of like, oh wow, if I know more than everybody else, then I have an advantage, right? So I think that's one of the main elements that like really gets people going. But I think especially if you're just a person who likes learning and you're curious, it's just and you like questioning whether it's authority or just questioning the world around you, which I think is important. Like I said, the smartest people are the ones learning from everyone and everything, right? And so if you're just like, what is money? That's a thing. Let me learn
Yeah.
about the history of money and like why it exists and why it's this way. And then you get into politics and you get into computer science, you get into the law, you get into tax, and you just see that there's like 15 industries that have had a effect or motivation to morph money into what it is today, right? And the pros and cons and what's strengths and weaknesses. And if you just love learning, there's just so much to unpack, right? And never people don't go to coffee shops and be like, so what do you think about the stability of the US dollar and why it
Yeah.
was created and what's like it's such a boring topic generally when you think about it. And most people don't like personal finance. They don't like balancing their checkbook. It's like unsexy. It's kind of a thing you just have to do to exist in our world because it's what makes the world go round, right? So people, it's
There's
just like
also a lot of fear around it as well. I mean, managing money and being afraid to lose money. It's kind of a scary topic for most.
yeah, and so it's intimidating. And if you don't think it's a skill set that you have, maybe you're not good at math, maybe you have no passion about this, you kind of want to stay away from it, because if it's not broken, you don't want to fix it, right? You're just like, it's good for me, like I'm good, I get my paycheck, I have this thing, I put some in my savings account, then I pay my utility bill, and like I got my system, don't screw with me, right?
Yeah.
Which is very cool. And like we're all creatures of habit because there's just so much to do in life, right? Like relationships are way more important to most people than managing your money, right? Or thinking if
Hmm.
money's broken. So or at least people who have girlfriends. And but no, it's been a fascinating journey, and the people that I meet that are like hardcore have studied the deep inner workings. It's just like hardcore people have gone down the positive psychology rabbit hole. It's like really in any sector, like those people are just super smart because they're naturally curious, and they naturally love learning and questioning the norms and challenging the norms to potentially make it better.
I agree. I mean, it's being open minded. I think, especially in the crypto space. You have to be, because otherwise, it's easy to just blow off the entire industry as dumb or uh, scammy. And in the past, it has been. So, I mean, even trying to decipher what is a legitimate project and what is not. I mean, it's still not relatively straightforward, but having an open mind for, in general, the technology and the projects, and it's um, necessary in crypto.
Yeah, you definitely have to have some time on your hands to
Yeah.
do all that research. And even us just talking out loud, I think why it resonates and I'm so personally interested into it is it checks so many things that I'm fascinated with. Right, I'm fascinated with business, and money is, you're primarily in the business to make money, right? So I'm like, yeah, what is money? Why am I building a business, right? Then it's also technology, right? All these cryptos are technology, right? Versus old money is just cotton and paper, right? It's like, yeah, there's machines that make it, but that's not technology. And then third is it's a lot of psychology, right? It's all psychology, especially when you talk about money, right? I mean, money, it's all made up. All money isn't real if you just step back and think about it, right? There's a great artist I like in Miami. His thing is money isn't real, and he makes these like beautiful $100 bills, all colorful. I can show you the link. His name is Mr. E, but it's super cool. Art, and his tagline is money isn't real, and it's true. It's all just a belief system. If we all believe Bitcoin is worth something, if we all believe gold is worth something, if we all believe the US dollar has value, if we all then just wake up tomorrow and think Dogecoin has value, like then it could be money, right? Like kind of, I mean, there's like hard elements of good, sound money for sure, and we can go down that rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, money between creatures like us is a belief system that we all agree that thing that we're exchanging is worth the same value to each other, right? And so it's all a lot of human psychology, and then you layer on all the other crazy elements like law and politics. It becomes wild.
Like focusing on Bitcoin specifically, is there anything that gets you excited for like the next year or two, or are you excited just to continue to kind of see like the general adoption of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think the last year has just been fascinating, mostly because I feel like it's received product market fit. It's like been validated and like finding the fit on at least store of value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not fully convinced it's the greatest peer-to-peer right now, especially on transaction, right? It's kind of difficult, and I'm super interested in all the layer two solutions, right? Like Lightning as an example, where it can be almost instant and practically free, versus $1 or $10 to do a transaction on chain. So, but yeah, I think it's found the store of value. I think the gold and the gold 2.0 narrative makes sense, and with all the inflation and money printing and quantitative easing going on in the United States, like I feel like I have better safety in sats than I do safety in the US
Yeah.
dollar, right? Like at this point, honestly, I think I feel I don't have to watch the news and worry about what the government's doing, about my US dollars. And if anything bad in the world, Bitcoin basically goes up generally. I mean, it's like, oh, the government's printing a bunch of money, Bitcoin goes up. Oh, it's like some World War III happened, Bitcoin goes up. Like literally every doomsday scenario, generally Bitcoin goes up, right? Um, so you're asking like, what am I most looking forward to in the year? Like, I don't think there's anything like specific. I think, I have a very long term, like 10 to 50 year horizon on Bitcoin. And that's the beauty of it. It's like, we don't need to make money more complicated than it is. I think it's pretty much everything it needs to be, right? I think the only innovations that are needed are UI and user experience things. So like corporations and engineers can make better UI. Like Cash App, I think has a great UI to manage, or Coinbase. There's a lot of companies that have made it simpler and easier for kind of retail customers to use it. So yeah, I'm mostly excited. I guess in the short term, I'm mostly excited for other countries that have not really fully learned about it, especially the ones that need it. Like I'm half Lebanese, and my family's lost 80% of their money in Lebanon because of the inflation going on in Lebanon. It's really hard. There's not good infrastructure to buy Bitcoin or any cryptocurrencies in Lebanon because one, they're on the OFAC list as a country after 9/11. Lebanon got added to the do not do business with as a country, so it's like really hard for anybody to do business, and like U.S. corporations can't do business in Lebanon. It's like straight up illegal. So there's
Mm.
silly politics and laws like that. And then, as Lebanon as an example, there's just like lots of corruption and government and instability. So, but they really need it. They really need Bitcoin as a country, and it's hard. So, I'm really looking forward to things to get unblocked in those countries, because I think it really is kind of freedom for away from dictatorships and corrupt governments that are just ruining people's lives and generational wealth, which is super depressing and sad. But I think Bitcoin is the lifeboat, right? Which is exciting in the short term. Medium term, I think seeing where Lightning and layer two solutions go from a technology perspective to make the currency story like real and happen. And if we can zap each other money anywhere around the world for 5 cents or less, like that's game changing.
Yeah.
And yeah, then long term, it's just it really is inevitable. It's just like, that's what's nice. You don't need a financial advisor to tell you which stocks to pick. Just dollar cost average into Sats, whatever you can put, and then just look at it in 30 years, and you're good.
I think one of the biggest unknown facts in general about Bitcoin is that since its inception, it's been compounding annually at almost 200%, or I think a little bit north of 200%. And so it's hard to find a stock or a company that is going to grow that quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And you just do the math, right? You do the math. If we think it's as good as gold, each Bitcoin is going to be 500,000 per Bitcoin. If it's 2x gold, it's about $1 million per Bitcoin, which I think Bitcoin is definitely 2 times better than gold. Gold sucks. Gold is terrible, right? So like if we literally just go, is it 2 times better than gold? I'm like, yes. So okay, it should be $1 million per coin, and we just need to wait 4 to 5 years for the other few 100 million people to join and the first billion people to join. And yeah, it's like that. Honestly, that's my floor, right? It's like, yeah, it's just a matter of time. So it's going to be super volatile, and there'll be days it goes down 60% and all of that. And that's a feature. That's not a bug. Yeah, it's there's not too much to worry about. It's pretty, it's checked the gold narrative. Now we just need to figure out the peer-to-peer, lower cost narrative and technology, and then it's just we wait for the scale and the engineers and developers and companies to build more features, and then just like bullshit like politics and laws preventing it being, especially the countries that really need it.
Yeah, and going back to your earlier point, it's been amazing just since 2017 how far the user interface has come. Cash App has done an amazing job, Coinbase, Gemini, all these exchanges making it as easy as possible to integrate into cryptocurrencies has been super impressive. I remember trying to buy crypto in 2017, and Bitcoin has been around for a while, and Ether launched in 2015, I believe. But even in 2017, when everybody was trying to sign up for a Coinbase account and get onto the exchanges, it took a long time. And it wasn't always straightforward. And if you wanted to buy larger amounts, that wasn't straightforward either. And so just the entire onboarding process has been significantly reduced in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and I'm sure people ask you as well. Like all my friends are like, "Hey, is it too late? Like it's too late, right? I shouldn't buy now. It's crazy to buy now." And it's definitely not. Like if you really think, I feel like we're in. If you do the math and you do the analogy, it's like we're in 1994 of the internet, right? It's like Netscape is kind of just rolling out. We're 56K dial-up internet with Netscape as the browser. There's like maybe Amazon and Google have been starting, but there's no Facebook, there's no TikTok, there's no Snapchat, there's no iPhone, there's no Bitcoin. Like none of this stuff even exists, right? So if you rewind back to 1994, like it was super gross, like hard to do command prompt technology, right? And that's the era we are in all cryptocurrency, right? And sure, it's gotten better, and it's great that there's big companies like Square making Cash App, and PayPal and others are getting into it, but it's still so early, right? It's like the first websites are getting stood up. So the fact that like Trezor and Ledger and Cold Card are like the go-to hardware is like, it's like a 50-person startup making hardware. It's like, imagine when big companies like Google and Apple and all these other big manufacturers are just like manufacturing these amazing products that are in this space, right? Like how different it'll be. So yeah, it's just super early. There's only about 150 million people into Bitcoin worldwide. From all the estimates I've seen, we'll be at about 1 billion people with Bitcoin in the next 4 to 5 years, which is faster growth than the internet, right? And so 10 times more people buying Bitcoin, the supply shrinking, 1% of corporations having Bitcoin, that'll be going up. Very few countries have Bitcoin. I mean, you literally just do the math and it's inevitable. It's just a matter of time. So definitely stack sats and hold is the plan, and set it and forget it.
I like that. That's good advice. So I guess, I mean, we could probably.
You want to talk about some altcoins? I mean, we talked about it a little bit at Ethereum. I mean, I think we all Bitcoin's good. We're done with it.
I don't. I mean, I would say in like 2017, I would classify them more as altcoins. I think now, like my personal belief is that there's different blockchains that can do different things. And I kind of view it just generally as like what is the purpose of each blockchain, and kind of how is the whole entire tech ecosystem of blockchain emerging. I think of Bitcoin's definitely the OG, and Satoshi's whoever they are or person, absolute genius. But I think what Ethereum has done, it's progressed a lot. Just the applications that are built on top of it, kind of all the research that's been going into the layer 2s, even the other L1 chains. I think going back to like what we were talking about earlier, like why Bitcoin and why does it matter? I think I'm just in general excited about the crypto and blockchain ecosystem, because it takes kind of the powers that we've seen in these tech companies where they built out these awesome platforms, but generally the product was the customers, or you're being sold ads, or ultimately, and even what we've seen off like Facebook or Twitter, like you can be kicked off these platforms and not really know why. Sometimes it's legitimate, sometimes it's kind of more ambiguous, but ultimately with these platforms, with crypto, is kind of putting the power back into the individual user instead of these larger corporations. And so I think more broadly, just as blockchain as a whole, that's why I'm excited. It empowers the individual instead of the company.
Yeah, and I violently agree with you on that, right? Like, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier on. I'm totally on board and on the decentralized new internet, right? One of my favorite, just at least from a conceptual standpoint, projects is Solid by MIT, and so it's solid.mit.edu, and is led by the inventor of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee, right? And he's working on this, and the whole thing is people own their own data, right? And it's not Facebook owns your data. It's you have a key and you go to the next Facebook or whatever and you unlock it, and then you make the decisions, right? Like only they can do it when you have opt-in, basically, right? And for sure, I can see like that future world, right? And working at Apple, like Apple is all about you own your own data, privacy, and it's really true. Working there, like just to stress for sure, Apple is like crazy in a positive way on how legit they are. Like they know no idea about anything about Apple Pay transactions, right? They don't know who's buying it. There's no weird cookies tracking you all over the internet, providing and retargeting ads, right? And that's why there's this big friction between Facebook and Apple and iOS 14, right? So Apple is like hardcore, and as a customer using an iPhone, it really puts me at ease, right? Because your point is we're not the product, right? Like if you use if you're on an Android and you're using Facebook, your product and your data is being sold to everybody without you really even knowing what's going on. And it's scary. And we've seen that, be manipulated and taken advantage of in elections worldwide on Facebook and ads, and just the crazy things you can do by manipulating people's brains in the masses. I mean, advertising is manipulating people to change their behavior to buy your product, but now you can do that with elections with just a few clicks on an ad buy on Facebook or Google, which is super scary. So I'm I know you and I joke, and I'm dumping on all the other altcoins, but you said it before, like having an open mind and learning from these things. Like I'm happy to like play around and test and explore. I mean, as technologists, we all need to, and there will be like an aha moment where you're like, oh my gosh, and there's just going to be like a tsunami, right? I personally don't think it's NFTs right now. I personally don't think ICOs, but we need to keep trying stuff, right? I just feel bad for the people that are going to lose a ton of money in NFTs. And matter of fact, I like your picture so much in your background. I'm going to take a photo of it right now. Yeah, there we go.
First
All
NFT.
right, and then I'm going to NFT that and sell it for like $10 million, and I'm going to copy and paste it so many times. So I'm not like, I don't, those product fits I'm not really in love with, but like I get it. At the core, it's like digital proofing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're just like signing that GIF or JPEG or whatever is like signed by that owner. And so decentralized identity is super interesting, has tons of use cases. I know Microsoft and the Ion project is working on that. Built on Bitcoin, by the way. Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating future world in 10 years. And I definitely agree with you that a lot is going to change. And the primary change is going to be we will own our own data. And we will own our own data by having a private key to a cryptographically backed blockchain or whatever, right? Whatever technology we use, whatever companies or organizations use the technology is still like unknown to me at the very least. I'm not sure if it's Filecoin. I'm not sure it's Ethereum. I'm not sure if it's Tezos, but it's going to happen for sure. And so that's why I'm just like a little hesitant on, loving or supporting these other kind of projects until there is a little bit more of a product market fit. But maybe I'm just being like conservative and only going in on the thing that it's proven, right? But to your point, it's hard. There's like 8,000 of these, so like which one do you like do the research on, and which one do you go deeper into?
Yeah, I mean, the research is hard, and I mean a lot of it, is super technical, and then like even if you can do it technically, then it's actually building it out and getting actual adoption. Because some of these chains may be superior to Ethereum from the technical standpoint, but they don't have a community or they don't have the tooling or the infrastructure bit around it. So it's not just the tech, it's also the community and the support behind it. And so it's a fascinating world that how kind of crypto has become, and in general, just the communities, how they're not hostile, but it's definitely different because people definitely want their certain blockchain to win, which is good and bad because people can, people, when you have a kind of stake, skin in the game, as they say, you're much more tied to the outcome or want to see a certain outcome. And so it definitely has some tribalism, but it's definitely hardened communities over time. But it's interesting to watch when some of the communities clash together.
I mean, you're totally spot on calling out like the developer community behind a project is probably what's going to make or break it, right? Because Apple's major success is because of the developer community. Like all the amazing iPhone apps is because amazing developers do and build on iOS before Android, because there's more money on iOS and it's a better user experience. So people start there because they want their startup to, have a better appearance, make more money, and maybe, their Swift operating, Swift language is better and faster potentially, right? So it's fascinating to see how much that decides on which technology wins, right? Like even Facebook and Twitter, they had developer communities, but they made a lot of bad decisions that really pissed off people, right? Like Twitter turned off the fire hose and made it paid. And so they just basically killed a bunch of Twitter apps and companies that just went away overnight because Twitter was like, oh, sorry, we made a centralized decision to turn off this and put you out of business, right? Which is super scary as a developer, right? You put your entire livelihood and it can get shut off by, a guy named Jack in San Francisco, right? I like Jack, so let me attack Zuck, right? Like, but so, Facebook does the same thing. They had a community of developers, and the Farmvilles and Zyngas in the world became multi-billion-dollar companies, and then they just reined it back and they deleted all their capabilities, and then they practically went to zero, right? So it's really, that's totally valid, totally true. And like doing part of the due diligence. It's like, who has a legitimate founder, who has a legitimate community, who's here to just, scam people. It's like, it's a lot. And there's but for sure, there's really interesting, awesome projects that are going on. There will definitely be a lot of things that come from it, but there will be 90+% graveyard, which is happens in like every technology cycle, which is fine. It's part of it, and it's part of Silicon Valley and tech in general. It's like 90% of these aren't going to work, right? As I just said, my startup VCs know that, right? And they set expectations, but it's worth people trying the 100 things, even if only one sticks.
Very true. Yeah, and I think to your point earlier about like Facebook shutting off the platform access, like that's kind of what gets me excited. I mean, because in going back to like empowering the individual or the individual developers, if you built on a decentralized platform, there's really no one that can shut off that platform. And you kind of have a solid footing or a solid foundation to build upon. And so, I mean, that is paramount. I mean, I think with like email, like if we all had different email protocols and we couldn't send emails to and from each other, like it's kind of shitty. But because everybody knows that the email protocol is the same, you can have different user interfaces on the front end and have different experiences. And so, over time, no matter what layer one blockchain wins, quote unquote, but there'll probably be many. Just the fact that it's open and developers can build on whatever chain suits their needs, I think is kind of inspiring and opens up kind of the technology world from a few players to many. And so I'm just excited by that possibility that more and more people have access to build really cool things and have that distribution as well.
For sure. I mean, I can't wait for the next decentralized Facebook and Twitter, right? I can't wait to not have to sit here and wonder what Zuck's going to do and, beg Jack to take down Trump because the majority of people didn't want that. And it was malicious and hurting, and killing people, right? Because of his tweets, right? So it'll be interesting. We'll have new problems in a decentralized world. If you can't stop it, there's going to be a lot of really bad illegal stuff, right? There's, I'm not a proponent. We shouldn't do it just because there will be bad illegal things. But all technologies come with pros and cons, and it's going to be fascinating to see, what comes from it. And yeah, it's just the beginning still.
It's exciting times for sure. I'm very optimistic and about the crypto community. And so it'll be a fun ride for the next couple decades for sure. Well,
absolutely.
We've been chatting for a while. I think just in general, do you have like any words of wisdom to the listeners of this podcast or any viewers on YouTube?
I'm not that wise. I don't know. This has just been a fun conversation. I definitely appreciate you pushing me to be more open-minded. I know I'm like a Bitcoin maximalist and almost brand myself that, but I'm bullish on Bitcoin as money, and I wish I just had more time to play around with other projects. But you always push me to have an open mind and study those. And I think anybody listening to this, and especially on all the topics, honestly, right? Like happiness, you got to go on your own journey, right? Like I just gave you a little bit of my spiel. I can provide resources. There's all kinds of, links and great movies and things. I can pass those along to you, Logan, if you want to like put some in the show notes or YouTube or whatever. I can give you like my top 5 go-to. And the same with crypto, right? Like I have a whole I've typed up a thing. It's like Bitcoin 101, other coins. Like just do your own research. Like buy these 5 books and read them. Right. Like I highly encourage you to do your own research. Right. And in the spirit of all things, cryptocurrency and blockchain, right? Don't trust, verify, right? Don't just trust what you and I, what Logan and I are saying or talking about. And maybe the key to happiness is different for you. Maybe it's just actively caring for yourself and not others, because that's all you need today, right? Like everybody's, there's not one size fits all in anything in the world, but definitely happiness, definitely crypto space. Do your own research. I'll send you a bunch of my go-to references and resources, and yeah, just have fun with it. I mean, life. Yeah, just enjoy. Like, don't like. There's so many people that I know that have so much money. They should have no worries in the world. Some of my wealthiest friends, richest friends are the most depressed, suicidal, unhappy people I know, right? And so understand what makes you truly happy. Don't just get on the treadmill and the hamster wheel and just keep running for the next job promotion. Don't just do things because that's what society or your friends or your parents or your spouse or anybody says, right? Like, and also in happiness, a lot of I'll find the article, but there was research that says that it was like the top six biggest regrets of the dying. So people that were basically on their deathbed, nurses and doctors asked them like, "What were your biggest regrets?" And they're all so like avoidable. Like the main, one of them that always stuck with me was, "Oh, I lived a life that others wanted me to live," right? It's like, why would you be 80, 90 years old and just be living a life that your parents wanted you to become and fit some mold like that? Why would you live with that regret? Just be yourself. Like, who cares what other people say, right? Other regrets are like, I didn't spend enough time with my friends and family. Like, don't kill yourself at work, right? Like, have work-life balance. It's all not about getting the paycheck and go work half time, make half as much pay, and actively care for other people and volunteer. You will be way happier, I promise, right? And be with your family, you'll be way happier, right? So everybody's got to make their own situation and finances and personal life work for whatever they need, but definitely question the norm. In the Apple spirit, think different. I think it's not just a marketing tagline. It really, everybody there and the Steves of the world really did think differently, right? And like, don't just accept the norm. And the whole crypto space very much like doesn't accept the norm, questions everything. That's why I love it as a lifelong learner and a curious person. So yeah, that's a lot of advice and random thoughts, but I'll share some links and
No,
do your own homework.
Very good words of wisdom, and I think that's a perfect note to end it on. Where can people follow you on social media?
Well, people can bid on my Logan NFT for $20,000 is my starting bid on Twitter. It'll be
I may have to buy it.
Yeah. And I'm going to delete the tweet afterwards. Yeah, I mean, you can, michaelrihani.com has my like professional resume and it has, links to all my social media, has my phone number, my email. You can reach out to me. You can ping me on LinkedIn. You can ping me on Twitter. Yeah, whatever. Michael Rihani, just on the internet, on the social networks, and genuinely reach out if there's anything I can do for you, Logan, or if anybody listens to this and it's like, wow, I want to ask Michael a question, or I want to tell Michael he's wrong about X, Y, or Z. Like, reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Michael. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, being my first guest, and again, always for the support and the friendship throughout our working together and after. So it means a lot.
And taking your money on poker on Saturdays. Yeah. This is likewise, man. This has been a lot of fun. I've never really done a podcast, so I'm learning how to turn HD video on Zoom and learning a bunch of cool things from you. And really appreciate your time on thinking of me to be your first guest, and just being a good friend and person in my world. So it's been a pleasure. Hope you all have a great night.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Signing off.